Everyone, and welcome back. In today's video I'm doing a 3 marker 3 colour challenge, and I'm going to be using the 3 Copic colours for the month of February, and those are E74, which is cocoa brown, RV32, which is shadow pink, and RV34, which is dark pink. And if you want more information about the Copic colour challenge, you can check out their Instagram page. They have all the information on there, but basically what it is every month the Copic marker company on their social media account is they're picking 3 colours and they're inviting artists to create an illustration with those 3 colours, or a piece of artwork with those 3 colours. And they're also featuring lots of artists, and I've really been enjoying looking at the different work. I love limited colour palettes and I love colour challenges, so I've really been enjoying participating in this challenge so far this year. So this is the piece that I've created. This is the line art I've created for this this month's challenge, and this line art is also available as a colouring page in my shop. There's a link in the description box below, so if you want to follow along, you can colour it however you want. You don't have to use just the 3 colours, but if you'd like to colour this image, then there's a link in the description box to my shop where you can find out all the information there if you want to. So the first thing that I did was I swatched out my colours, and I find that swatching out the colours is a really important part of the process for me, particularly when I'm sitting down to do a colouring session. I colour and do line art and sketch in different sessions, so I very rarely work on a piece from start to finish in one go. So a piece like this, I've done the sketching in one session on one day, the line art in another session on another day, and then the colouring. So the way that I like to kind of warm up and get into the colouring is I like to swatch out my colours. And I do that even though I've used all my markers, I know what the colours are like. I like to see how they're going to work together. I like to swatch them out. It kind of gets me in the zone. It's like a warm-up session. Also, because I'm just using these 3 colours, I wanted to see how they blended together. I wanted to see how I could layer them, and if I could layer them up to create different shades. And so yeah, I like to start with making some colour swatches, and I make sure that I make the colour swatches on the same type of paper that I'm colouring on. Because Copic, or not just Copic, but markers in general can be lighter or darker, and they can blend differently depending on what paper you're using. I find that it's important for me to make sure that I am swatching them out on the same type of paper as what I'm colouring on. So I take a piece of my go-to marker paper and I cut it up into little squares, and I keep those squares out on my desk so that when I go to use my markers and I grab a scrap piece of paper to do a colour swatch on, that I'm actually looking at a really accurate representation of how the colours are going to react. So that's just a tip for colour swatching, and I find that very helpful, and that's what I do. And so I'm starting with the poppies, because when you're doing a piece like this, or at least when I'm doing a piece like this and when I'm only using 3 colours, it can be really hard to know where to start and where to put what. So what I decided to do was to just lay down one colour and to do the easiest thing first. So I knew that all the poppies were going to be pink, to be a blend of the 2 pinks and the browns. Actually, I've used all 3 colours making the poppies, and I've kept some white of the paper in there as the highlights. By laying down the poppies, I'm establishing where the colour balance is going to be and how the colours are going to be spread throughout the piece. And then I just went in and I did the background in the brown, because that was something else that I knew I wanted to do. And sometimes colouring in a background with a dark colour can be a little bit nerve-wracking, but I found that it worked really well for this piece, because I really wanted the little dots, the circles, to be white. I wanted quite a lot of white in this piece, and so I decided just to get that background colour in. It took me a long time to colour that, and it's so much easier sometimes to get those dark colours in, to get the big blocks of colours done first, because that way you can go ahead and you can balance it out and decide where to put all the other colours afterwards. I find it much easier if I do the largest areas of a piece first. It just really helps me to balance out the colours later on when I'm doing all the details. And I found that these 3 colours blended really well, and I've been watching some other artists doing this particular challenge, and some people like the colours, some people don't, and I think that's part of the reason why I like doing these sorts of challenges, is that you are bound to get colours that you may... sometimes you get colours that you like. I, so far, have loved all the colours that the Copic company has picked. But when you're doing a colour challenge where you're picking random colours, like when you put all your markers into a bucket and then you pick them with your eyes closed, or when you're doing a challenge where someone else is picking the colours, you may get colours you don't like. You may get colours that don't fit your style or don't fit the subject matter that you draw, or that you've just never used before, or that are too dark or that are too light. You know, you get colours that you wouldn't pick yourself, and I think because of that it challenges you to look at colours differently, and it can also introduce you to new colours, and it can also sometimes I find that with colours we all have our go-to colours. We have our colours that we know work really well together and that we tend to use all the time. And sometimes for me, I can get it's easy to get kind of stuck in a rut, or at least just to stick to the safe colours, stick to the colours that we know always work. And I find that I like doing these challenges because it makes me use colours maybe that I haven't used before together, and it makes me experiment. And I think experimentation is really, really beneficial in the long run. So I particularly like that about this challenge. And these three colours go really nicely together. The two pinks are part of the same blending group, so they're going to blend well. The brown is obviously not part of the same blending group because it's a brown. It goes nicely with the pinks, but you can also layer the brown into the pink to create a darker pink. So I found that I was able to get quite a few different shades, particularly in the poppies, by just layering up those three colours. And when you're doing a colour challenge like this, I think it's important to keep in mind the colour of the paper and that you don't have to colour everything. So you can leave places white, and you can also use a colourless blender if you're using markers to feather the colour out into the white. So you're allowed to use an outline, a pen or something to make an outline, and you're also allowed to use the colour of the paper, which in this case is white. So I particularly like leaving areas of the illustration white to take advantage of the white paper, and also to make sure that the piece doesn't become too muddy. The white helps to lift areas of the piece, and it's a bit difficult to explain, but hopefully you can see what I mean a bit later on. When it came to the design of the piece, I'm keeping all the pieces that I'm doing for this particular colour challenge. I'm not trying to make them the same, but I am designing them to be a set, so that there'll be variations between them and they'll be different. But when at the end, when I finish them all, I want them all to look cohesive, and I want them to look like a set. I have a little secret project in mind that I'm going to do with them all when I have enough of them. So for this one, I decided to do poppies because when I looked at the colours, those three colours, I felt that they had, well, at least for me, they felt slightly vintagey, old-fashioned. They gave me that kind of vintage, soft, muted colour vibe. So I decided I really wanted to draw these poppies and to have the poppies as the main element on the page. And for the girl, I didn't want to give her like a Victorian or Edwardian hairdo, but I gave her an Alice band, I gave her a little collar on her top and a little choker, so that she has that old-fashioned vintage vibe, but without it being obviously from the past, so obviously Edwardian or Victorian. So she just kind of looks a little bit old-fashioned, I think. At least that's how I saw her. You can see now I'm just literally taking one part at a time and just kind of placing the colours around. I try not to get the same colour next to each other too much, but when you're only working with three colours, that's really hard. So I'm just trying to balance out the colours, and I'm trying to leave enough white in the piece so that different areas pop out. And I do go ahead a bit later on and add a few highlights with a white pencil and a white paint pen, and I do believe that that's allowed. I haven't seen anyone say that's not allowed, and because white is the colour of the paper and I'm only adding white highlights, I think that's perfectly fine, because you're allowed to add details with a pen that you line with, and white is obviously the colour of the paper, and I'm just popping it out a little bit more. So another thing I had in mind when I was designing this piece was to make it a little bit more fluid than the last piece was. So I am sticking with a design element for these pieces, that I'm drawing backgrounds, I'm drawing borders, I'm drawing lots of details. That's kind of my goal for these pieces, and to keep them all a similar size and a similar orientation on the page. But with this piece, I wanted it to be a bit more fluid. So the borders are made up of vines and the poppy stems. So they're not straight angles, because normally when I draw a border, I draw it, you know, a little strip, a rectangle basically, and then I decorate inside the strips, and normally that's what I do. But for this piece I wanted it a little bit more fluid, and I felt it kind of fitted in with the vintage and the poppies. So it does fit with the one I did last time, but it is also a little different at the same time. And I did end up doing quite a bit of layering on the face. In particular, I used the brown and the pinks to go ahead and to go over the areas in the face. So now I'm just adding the white highlights to the piece, and I'm using a white coloured pencil to add the highlights on her face, because I didn't want to put the white paint pen onto her face, because I felt like that would just be too much of a contrast. So I like to use a combination of a white pencil and a white paint pen to do the white highlights. I really like the pencil because it gives you a white highlight that is very subtle. Right, so that's about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching this month's colour challenge. I'm looking forward to doing the one for March next month. I can't wait to see what colours Copic pick. If you're doing this challenge, or if you have some thoughts on 3 colour challenges, make sure you leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think, and also let me know if you have any questions about this piece or about doing these challenges in general. So anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful week, guys, and I will see you next time.